What's up, good people? Welcome to Outside the Trenches here on KC Sports Network. We appreciate you spending part of your day with us as we inch ever so closer to the NFL draft coming up this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Now, if you don't have a spot yet to watch the draft and you are in the Kansas City area, we invite you to join our crew at the Kingdom Bar and Grill in Overland Park. We'll be going live throughout the entire draft. We'll have 360 vodka drink specials thanks to our partnership with 360 Vodka. We'll have the 360 girls out there on Thursday and Friday, handing out samples, passing out drinks. We'll have food specials, special guests, giveaways, and a lot more. It is going to be a good time. I can promise you that. And if you can't make it, follow us as a second screen option on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch. We have got you covered wherever you are at. And everybody, I am really excited for today's show as we have Carmen Vitali of the Draft Network on to talk us through what we could be seeing on Thursday night and what might surprise us. Carmen, it is good to see you.
It's great to see you, BJ. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. I'm so excited for you, and we know each other a little bit. I want to get into kind of your path and how you ended up at the Draft Network, because I know you haven't been there all that long. But can you I know you're speaking to Chiefs fans right now, but can you talk a little bit about just how you ended up where you're at and, what your role is right now?
Yeah, no, this past 6 seasons, I was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers through that Super Bowl season over the Kansas City Chiefs, in fact.
You had to go there.
So I know. Yeah, I did. Of course I did. Of course I did. What was I going to do? I'm not going to shy around. I mean, I'm not flashing the ring.
I was going to say, I half surprised you to have, I thought you were going to have your ring on, but I appreciate you for not doing that.
And I mean, the Chiefs have one too. It's not like, this is really that, you're fine. The Chiefs fans are fine. That was the whole thing I said that entire season was like, Chiefs fans are fine. They don't need this one. Give this to us, please. But it was a wonderful experience. Loved being part of the team. Really was just so lucky with the staffs and the players that I got to work around, especially Bruce Arians' staff. Can't say enough about that group of men and women, for that matter. And all the access and just, them just generally letting me hang around and learn so much about this industry through that experience. So I loved it, had a great time, but moved on, just knew that it was time to move on to something different. Wanted to start covering the whole league and not be so hyper-focused on one team anymore. I'm an NFL fan. I've grown up an NFL fan. I grew up outside Chicago. Actually, a long-time suffering Bears fan, and I've been in hibernation for the last 6 years because I clearly cared about one team and one team only, and they will always have a special place in my heart. But now my Bears fandom is back, and so is the fandom for the rest of this league. So now I get to cover the entire league for the Draft Network in part of their bolstered effort to cover the league and the pros, not just the draft. So that's kind of where the company is moving, and it's super exciting. And I'm really happy to be able to build something along with just a tremendous group of people.
Yeah, just from the outside and not knowing a lot of people who are there right now, but just seeing what the Draft Network has become and seeing where it started, and that it was a perfect time for something like that in this kind of digital space to kind of lean in on these new platforms and the way that things are doing, and just the way that it presents itself is very professional. The content has been fantastic. There's a lot of great people over there. And so it was really exciting to see you get a piece of that and go over there and kind of add to what they're building. Is really cool. And I got to go back to this because it kind of hurts my heart a little bit that it didn't work out necessarily the way that Bears fans would have wanted with Matt Nagy. As somebody who was a chance to be around him for a number of years, I would have put a lot of money on him being a successful head coach. And we both know there are a lot of things that go into someone being successful at that level. Some are in their control, some are not. We won't necessarily know everything about everything, but I can tell you that your general manager is amazing and one of my favorite people. And not only is Ryan Poles amazing, Trey Koziel, who he brought over to work on that personnel staff, is somebody I got to know really well when I was with the Chiefs. And Trey, I talked to him when we were out in Vegas for the East-West Shrine Bowl back in January. And Trey is a phenomenal, not just scout and evaluator, and he was an asset to the Chiefs for the number of years that he was there, but just a fantastic person. And that's the one thing. And I want to ask you about that because I'm going off topic here a little bit, but whatever.
No, it's fine.
It's the thing that I love the most about working with the Chiefs. It wasn't even being the conduit between the fans and the organization and being able to tell stories and kind of connect that those two things in a cool way to kind of bring insight into the organization while knowing that there are a lot of, things that you have to avoid and things you can and can't do. And it's a very creative process that people like yourself that were so good at it, and Kiana so good at it.
Oh my gosh.
like, it's cool to talk with people who understand the dynamics that are involved and the challenge that's involved to still figure out a way to create value for what you're doing that brings value to fans and that they're interested in the stuff that you're doing. And I followed a little bit of what you're doing with the Bucks. It hurt my heart when they lost, but what do you miss most? Because for me, it was getting to know, it wasn't necessarily always the content, but just getting to know how everything worked and how many people behind the scenes that you never hear from or never see necessarily, but are so vital to what's happening. That was what was cool for me. I know it still hasn't been that long, but what was it that you loved most about working for a team?
No, that was definitely up there. And I think you're actually the second person to tell me about what's his name again? The one that Ryan Poles took with him.
Trey Koziel.
Trey. Okay. Yeah. So you're the second person to talk about him with me. And just to say like, oh my God, he's a great guy. Like, you know, the same exact sentiment you just gave me. But that was the big thing, right? Is when you're part of these organizations, you see not just the general manager, not just the head coach, you see what happens behind the scenes. Like with the Bucks, it was John Spytek and Mike Greenberg and Jackie Davidson behind Jason Light that made everything work so well. And I think Mike Greenberg especially has gotten some of his due. And I love seeing like Good Morning Football, like all those guys kind of give love to the people that don't get to share in the spotlight, but are nonetheless vital to what that organization is trying to do. And yeah, I mean, I'm a big relationships person, and I love learning about the game itself. And so I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about how grateful I was to Bruce's staff, because like I said, they just let me hang around, and I learned so much as far as the game of football goes. You know, got to dissect the defense, and I got to learn just, you know, firsthand what went into the offense and building that out, and where, I don't know, just where like the priorities were. And you get to talk about so many things and just have these conversations in the hallway, and you can just walk down to, you know, coaches' offices and ask them about something right away. Like, you know, something happens in a game, good, bad, or whatever. And you can be like, okay, I need to figure out why that happened. And you can go and you can figure it out. Whether you can say what happened is another story. And that is you have to kind of walk along eggshells and kind of dodge landmines as far as things that you can and can't say. But I really thought that, you know, bringing people closer and bringing people a view of these guys, who they were as people, and the people that are behind the scenes more, only connects the fans even more. And I really appreciated getting to be that go-between. And that was kind of my mission in a lot of ways. That's kind of how I operate too when it comes to players. Like, I love the trench guys because I don't think they get enough credit between the offensive line and the defensive line. Like, I want to sing their praises constantly. And so, but that goes for, you know, staff and personnel too. I want to sing the praises of the guys that don't get it. Because like, again, it just there's so many moving parts, and it takes so much to make stuff happen that people don't even get to see. So I tried to pull back the curtain as much as I possibly could and show who these guys and girls were, for that matter.
I want to throw a little love out to Mike Borgonzi, Mike Bradway, a couple of those guys, in addition to Ryan Poles, those guys that help Brett, and that it's a whole team effort. But it's funny to say that about, you know, something goes wrong or you see something in a game, you go down to coach's office. Chiefs weren't really like that. I couldn't just walk into coach's office, but hey, I got a question. But there were times in which, like, I wanted to go into like the players' film room. And just kind of watched on the Exos system back before they just went full iPads. They had like workrooms where you could go watch film. I remember having to get permission from John Dorsey at that time to go in and watch film. And he just said, like, why do you need this? I said, I just don't want to ask a stupid question of coach, because, you know, like, you need to know better if you're working for the team where a guy goes out and catches a touchdown and everybody's talking about game-winning touchdown. Everybody talks about him. Well, if the rest of the game, he missed a bunch of blocks, dropped a pass, ran a wrong route, like, coach isn't going to be happy with his performance, even if he made the one play at the end. Well, I wanted to make sure I was the one putting coach in a position. If I asked a question in a presser, I needed to be fully aware, if I was asking about somebody doing well, that they really did do well the way that coaches see it, not just the way that we see it on the outside. And so, yeah, there's that fine line of, you break something down. I was never a big breakdown. I loved football in that way, but I knew what I didn't know. And it's funny, the more basic questions you ask people of that level, and I think this would surprise people on the outside that think you need to show how smart you are to some of these people, where if you're real with them and just like, I don't really understand, like, even this basic game, they love teaching you if you show them hey, I'm just trying to learn the game. I am not trying to present myself as an equal or that look how smart because it's very easy to see through that at that level.
Right.
I always got more respect by just asking some of those, not being afraid to ask some, what I would think be air quote dumb questions.
Right.
But yeah, it was a great experience during my time. I know you love your time with the Bucks, but let's get to the draft stuff here now, because that's what we're here to talk about. And the draft is almost here. I want to go through 5 things that could happen, or 5 topics, 5 storylines on Thursday night that might surprise people a little bit. And just to start plugging that in, like, here's, something to keep in mind. So I want to go through those with you, if that's okay.
Let's do it. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a ton of surprises, because I can't remember the last time that none of us knew who the first round pick was going to be, or the first overall pick was going to be, I feel like there's a new rumor every day, and I don't know what to believe. Which
you don't believe anything coming out this week. I just turn my Twitter, I just mute everybody. Like, I don't believe
coming out
any
this
of
week.
You.
Honestly, the last 2 weeks, you really shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's all smokescreen. I just can't figure out the Jags. This is an aside, but I can't figure out the Jags. They have the first overall pick. Why? You don't need to smokescreen. You don't need to just. Yeah. I'm like, unless there really is a difference of opinion between all the major decision makers in the Jags organization, and I'm inclined to think that maybe that is the case, because otherwise, what motivation do you have?
Yeah, I think everything is a smokescreen, but that's actually a good point. That there's some organizations that stuff may just get out. It may just leak out. They have no idea.
And if it's going to be a big organization, it's going to be the Jaguars.
Just the dunk on the Jags here, but yeah, it's never going to happen with the Chiefs. I can tell you that people say they know what the Chiefs are going to do. They do not know what the Chiefs are going to do. There is no benefit to the Chiefs telling anybody what they want to do going into this draft. So I will believe nothing that I hear coming out of rumors around the Chiefs right now. But let's go with the first one, and that is, let's talk wide receivers in this draft. I think, paying attention to what happened in free agency and looking at some of the money that got thrown around. And while we're dunking on the Jags, we can talk about Christian Kirk getting $37 million guaranteed. That's not the length of the deal. That's guaranteed money over 4 years. Allen Robinson, $30 million guaranteed. Russell Gage got $20 million guaranteed. Mm-hmm. Zay Jones, $14 million guaranteed. And when you look at that, relatively speaking, to what a first round pick could cost in a very deep wide receiver draft, in some of these mock drafts, you have as many as 7-8 wide receivers going in the first round just based on talent. Well, when you look at the business side of the game, a first round pick, like the 18th pick last year, was slotted to get $15.6 million guaranteed over 4 years. And so some of these contracts, we were just talking guaranteed money. Those contracts are 2 times, 3 times that size over the length of the deal. So how many wide receivers do you expect to go? And is looking at 7. And I'm talking, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Jamison Williams, Chris Olave, Treylon Burks, Jahan Dotson, Christian Watson, George Pickens, Sky Moore. I mean, that's 9 guys right there that have all been projected as first round picks. Do you think that this is a thing that we are actually going to see come to fruition because of just the wide receiver contracts being out of control in free agency?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the perfect storm, right? Just because you named those 9 guys, but all 9 guys are deserving of those first round grades, and they're deserving of those first round positions and selections. So not only do you have now this need with this wide receiver market being the latest victim of inflation in this country, but you also have the talent to back it up. And I think that just in general, this draft is very deep at multiple positions because of that COVID year, guys going back, now coming back. They went to school, went back to school for 1 year, and now they're coming out. So you have this influx of talent, and I think it's the perfect storm. And I don't think, you're going to want to get these guys on the cheap as much as possible, because you're not going to be able to afford them down the line. You might not even afford their 5th-year options at this point for what's happening in the league and across the league. And again, for players that maybe aren't bona fide wide receiver ones or again, the Jags, but Christian Kirk, I don't think anybody would by far and away say that he's top, top 10 receivers in this league. Would you put him in the top 10? Because I don't think I
put him in top 10 of great timing to be a free agent.
Yeah,
I think that's what most players
and having a GM that needs to save his job. So
I don't like to say that. Yeah, I don't think, and I hate saying this because I don't think any player is overpaid, but because I think they should all get paid.
Right.
But as it relates to,
that's a big football, I think. I've heard that from scouts, from personnel and coaches. It's like, you're worth what you can get at the end of the day. You're worth
it's set by the market, not by the talents. When you become a free agent, are you healthy during that one window where you get to become a free agent? And if you hit it right, I mean, we could all be Kirk Cousins, just be perfect in the right situation, obviously the right position, but just make tons and tons. Sam Bradford, just it was the right time for him to be a free agent, and all of that, for it to play out that way. But I do think there's definitely something, as you have all of these guys behind the scenes that run the cap. And for the Chiefs, it's Brant Tillis and Chris Shea, guys that you might hear their names every once in a while, but those are the guys setting the cap. They're the ones projecting, this is what we think the cap's going to be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road. Here's our cash flow, which is where they budget, not necessarily cap, because you can move cap around all over the place. But, cash flow is the one place where any business has to set a budget. And so they're the ones kind of planning out what this looks like. And they have an idea what wide receivers are coming up in free agency next year and the year after. It's really a 40 game of chess that they're playing, that fans, when they just look at a board saying these are the top talents available this year, they're all playing this kind of long game as it relates. But the roster composition as it comes to the finances, when you look at the wide receiver position and what happened, to your point, you have a lot of guys, 9 guys right there that could be taken in the first, and not a lot of people are going to be terribly surprised that those guys go high. But when you have a team like the Chiefs, or some of the other teams that are going to be picking at the end of the first round that might need some help at wide receiver, it makes all the sense in the world to get these guys, quote, on the cheap compared to what they would have to pay. To your point, Christian Kirk is not a top 10 receiver. He's probably not even a top 20 receiver in the league, to be honest. But you needed help and you didn't have a young guy available because either you missed on your draft picks or you didn't invest in that position. This is the flip side. Well, now you've got to overpay compared to what you would get in the draft to get a veteran who could come in and play right away. But wide receivers definitely one. Chiefs fans, they've been talking wide receiver. It's a popular pick for the Chiefs right now. They lost Tyreek Hill. Obviously, they brought in Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They brought in Juju Smith-Schuster. They still have Travis Kelce. But those aren't, I guess, long-term deals. Those guys aren't going to be with Patrick Mahomes throughout the majority of, the prime of his career. So they need some young talent there. Do they wait to the second round? Do they take a guy in the first? The roster composition, the contract stuff has to be part of that conversation.
Absolutely. And these guys are also evaluating classes 2-3 years out. So who's coming up next year and the year after that, and in the draft. And then not only whose contracts are expiring, but then the players that are going to be coming into the league as well. So you have to take all of that into account. I don't envy any of those cap guys because it's a constantly moving puzzle. And it's insane.
Yeah, they say the cap doesn't exist, but that doesn't mean there aren't guys behind the scenes that have to do a lot of work to move things around and make it work.
Accounting has gotten very creative.
And now you got voidable years, and now they just keep adding things to it. It's like, at this point, just rewrite the rules. If the cap doesn't exist, let's just figure out a new way to do this. But let's move on to the second topic. And this one is indirectly tied to the Chiefs, and Chiefs fans should be rooting for this, and that is quarterbacks. You've got your Kenny Pickett's, your Malik Willis, your Desmond Ritters. You have these guys that people are projecting to go in the first round. There's not that bona fide one guy who's going number 1 overall that you could just slot it in. Not that the Jags need a quarterback right now after taking Trevor Lawrence, but where do you see some of these quarterbacks going? There's some stuff on social media the last couple of days about Malik Willis being a second round talent. Malik Willis ain't going in the second round. I can tell you that right now without even talking to people around the league. But where do you think a surprise could come on Thursday night with either the number of quarterbacks going or how high they go? Because as a Chiefs fan, I want as many quarterbacks going as high as possible. I want people trading up for quarterbacks and push some of those skill position guys down.
I mean, there's types of teams, right? There's teams that need a quarterback, and then there's teams that are rooting for all the quarterbacks to go because they want, all these other players to fall. But I'm a little bit more in the camp of, I don't know that Malik Willis will fall out into the second round, but I don't think he'll be the first quarterback taken. Just because I feel like if you are a quarterback needy team, and so much so that you're about to take a quarterback in the first round, you're going to need that guy to come in and be an impact player right away. And I think Malik's ceiling, I've said this, this whole process, like Malik's ceiling is the highest of this quarterback class. I don't think there's a doubt about that, but he is a work in progress. And he is not going to be ready to start and command an NFL offense right away. And I think that Kenny Pickett is the guy that you could slot in and be that. He's the high floor guy, right? So I think it's interesting when you're talking about, the talent pool of these quarterbacks. Yes, there are guys that have higher ceilings. I think Desmond Ridder kind of falls into that category too, but you're going to need to work on them. So their ideal landing spot is somewhere that already has a quarterback, at least for a year or two, and you can develop these guys. And I just don't think that the teams that are like that quarterback needy, I feel like they're going to be fighting over Kenny Pickett because they need someone to come in right away, and they don't have the luxury of sitting him behind someone else, sitting a quarterback behind someone else. And I mean, in talking to people around the league, like I understand kind of this narrative of these guys kind of dropping out and maybe kind of falling, because anybody that I've talked to doesn't have a first round grade on any of these quarterbacks for that matter, even Kenny Pickett. And so I think it's interesting when, and that's what matters, right? Is when it's not the media hype, and it's not like how like we're all perceiving these guys and who's, the best, whatever. It's how NFL front offices see these guys. And if they don't have first round grades on these guys, I think it could, and I know it's not a good thing for your Chiefs if things are, if the quarterbacks do fall.
It could still, I mean, you're picking at 29 and 30. So even if some of these quarterbacks, if Ridder and I don't think Willis is going to fall that far. And you would know, you're more plugged in on this stuff than I am. But just from a talent perspective and a quarterback perspective, I'd be surprised if they fell that far. But you start getting teams at the top of the second round that start getting a little nervous that, hey, I can't believe the guy's still there in the 20s, the late teens, trade up. That's still good for the Chiefs. Some of those guys will still fall and push down. But I think, the one thing with quarterbacks, and it seems obvious to say this at this point, but you can't understand the mental acuity of playing that position unless you sit in that meeting room and you talk with them about it. And that's going to be the thing with Malik Willis, that if a team takes him high, then he sat and he absolutely aced his ability to understand how to read defenses and how to run offenses outside of what he was asked to do in college. And so he's going to run a new system, and that's going to be, does that OC, does that quarterback coach believe that he has the ability to look at a defense and know what he's trying to do offensively and how to combat that, play that chess game that quarterbacks at that level have to play that isn't discussed enough because it's that whole side of the game that we don't understand. I've said that before. It's what Patrick Mahomes never gets enough credit for is his didactic memory. Like his photographic memory. He could tell you every defense he faces, how many times they ran it, what they do in these situations, what their tendencies are. And that's what ultimately is going to decide whether these young quarterbacks are successful or not. I think you bring up a great point of it's going to depend on the situation he goes to. And I think that's probably true for every quarterback, whoever gets drafted. Go to the right situation. If they need to sit, let them sit. But I'm team everybody draft up move up for a quarterback if they need to. The next one is very much involved with Chiefs fans because there have been these things thrown out for the last few weeks. And this is before the window of I don't trust anything. So this stuff was being thrown out there. And that is Oregon edge rusher Kayvon Thibodeau and him falling relatively speaking to what people thought, which was he's a top 5 pick talent wise. And now they're saying, hey, maybe he falls, down near 10 or even a little bit after 10. Do you believe any of this for a talent like that? Or do you think there's something real here that we could see him fall? Because edge rusher is definitely a position that the Chiefs are going to address with one of their first 3 picks, whether it's a trade for a veteran that we don't see coming, or if it's one of those first draft picks, they need an edge rusher. Kayvon falling has the ears perked up of some Chiefs fans. Do you think it's real, or do you think this is all made up?
I think it's made up, quite honestly. I don't think that guy with that much talent and just that much explosiveness and bend and versatility that he has, I feel like NFL front offices are not going to be, scared by this narrative that like he doesn't care about football or whatever it is. Again, like you said before, we don't know how these guys are in those meetings with coaches and scouts and GMs and stuff. And I think that he's probably blown a lot of these guys away because he's a very cerebral player. And I mean, the Pac-12 gets the knocks that it does, and I get it. But I mean, he was just, a defensive, like cornerstone of that Oregon defense. And you go against very athletic offenses in the Pac-12. They might not be, that ground and pound, like really good SEC type offenses, but you're still getting pro style offenses that you're going against. And so I just think that with the skill set he has, I think people kind of needed to manufacture narratives around him just because of the fact that it was so Like he's a good player. Anybody you watch, one game of his and you can see it. And I don't think that, like I said, NFL front offices are scared off by the potential. I have to catch myself even when the media gets to talk to these guys at podium sessions and stuff like the combine and everything like that. And some of these guys are not super interested in talking to the media and all the other stuff. And my personal feelings aside, like, does that mean that he can't play on Sundays? No, it doesn't.
Right.
It might mean that he's not going to be a media darling. He might not be the best at your asset shoot. You might not want to bring him into the post-game press conference all that much unless he has a big game, whatever that is. But like, that doesn't affect their performance on the field. And so I don't think that that's taken into consideration by NFL front offices literally at all.
Yeah. We as in the media on the outside now spend so much time talking about this, where from an organizational standpoint, how easy it is to figure out. You call your area scout and you say, how does this guy practice in the middle of like the spring? It's going hard. You contact Oregon's strength and conditioning coach. Like, how does this guy show up to all of the voluntary workouts in the summer? How does this guy work? That tells you if a guy cares about football.
Correct.
I remember talking with Mike Borgonzi about this specific thing, and it was just asking these guys, is that player going hard? Does football mean something to him outside of everything else? It's very easy for those guys to figure that out. And that's where your area scouts and their relationship with the head coaches plays such a vital role of those coaches being honest with those scouts of, does this guy really care about football? And that is, does he care about practicing hard and holding his teammates accountable, not just when the lights come on Saturdays or in a primetime game in the Pac-12, or when he's interviewing at the combine. Or I always enjoy talking with guys at either the Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, because it feels like agents haven't gone through media training like they do at the combine. Because by the time you get to the combine, they're not saying anything. Like, they're just here to contribute. They're going to do whatever their coaches tell them, and you can almost tell you exactly what they're going to say after you ask the question. But yeah, I think from the outside, it's as simple as just calling those guys and seeing how they worked the rest of the time. But I'm with you. I just don't see how a guy with that kind of talent and that kind of athleticism at that position, knowing how important it is in today's NFL, the only way you stop some of the high-powered offenses is to get pressure on a quarterback. That is the only thing that's slowed Patrick Mahomes down. The Chiefs offense, it was, you get pressure on him just like anything else. That's it. That's why the keys to the game for every pregame show in the history of NFL has been get pressure on the quarterback.
Get pressure on the quarterback.
Don't turn the ball over and get pressure on the opposing quarterback. Like, that's it.
Although I will say with Patrick Mahomes, it's get pressure on the quarterback with 4, because if you blitz him, he's very, very good at evading that and figuring that out very quickly. So
it helps if you have 2 of the fastest linebackers in the league to go sideline to sideline as well. So
I can't think of an example where that worked out. But I can't think of what game you're referring to at all.
Let's move on, Carmen. All right. And the next one, and this is one of my favorite players in the draft, because, and I've said this on this show multiple times, that my favorite tweet coming out of the combine was that Jordan Davis was opting out of the NFL to join the Avengers. So his size and speed, I just hope he doesn't end up at the Chargers. But for Chiefs fans, he's the outside the box type of thinking. If all the edges, if Karlaftis is gone and your top 4 or 5 edges are all gone, and I don't want to give away the next topic that we're going to discuss on injured players coming out, but if the top edges are gone and they don't feel comfortable with anybody who's left to draft at that spot, and there's not a wide receiver, if they don't want to wait, Jordan Davis would make sense to me to pair next to Chris Jones to just wreak some havoc. Doesn't fix the edge problem, but he's such a unique talent and skill set at his size that he's really the most interesting player in this draft to me, because a lot of people will see him as a 2-down player just because of his size and because he can't go out there and play all 3 downs. Not necessarily most defensive tackles at this point don't, but what do you see from Jordan Davis, and what are you hearing, or what are your just kind of overall thoughts to how interesting it's going to be for him? Because he could go as high as top 10, but he could also fall into the 20s, and it really wouldn't surprise me just because of that usage and the value as far as snap counts goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you said it, and that's a good way to phrase it too. Like, I don't think that the interior guys get enough credit for what happens on the outside, and like if you have guys eating up space on the interior, like, it makes things so easy for those outside guys and the defensive ends or outside linebackers, whatever scheme you're in, and frees them up in these one-on-one matchups. So if you can get Jordan Davis to do that, especially in like I feel like he would fit well into a 4-3, and into that 4-3 front, and be able to be that kind of versatile, really athletic guy. up front. And it is interesting though, because I think after the combine, everyone was like, oh my God, he's going to be a top 10 pick. Like you see that athletic performance out of a guy his size, and it's impressive. I think we're forgetting a little bit more about Devontae Wyatt, who I think before Jordan Davis's, combine performance was maybe the consensus top defensive tackle to come out of Georgia, or that Georgia team. Now I think that he's definitely more of that like space eater, run stopper. Like he's not one of those, like he's not really going to be, I mean, he could get penetration from the interior, but I don't, see him being as versatile as Jordan Davis could be for a team. But that being said, I don't really know. Yeah. Like if you, like you said, he could go in top 10, he could fall to the 20s. I've seen him fall a little bit more as we keep doing these mock drafts, especially even on TDN site. I've seen Jordan Davis get down into the 20s. And I think if there's a guy like that, or even an edge rusher that the Chiefs really like, you've got 2 first-round picks back-to-back at the bottom of the round. Package those, send them up, and you go up and get somebody then. If that's the biggest need, I think that's a great strategy for the Chiefs, especially because the Chiefs have 12 picks. Yeah. You don't need that. Like you're not that far away from fielding a fantastic team. It's not like you're in a rebuild and you need all those picks. So use them to your advantage and go and get the guys you want. So whether it is Jordan Davis or whether it is an edge rusher that is going to get eaten up or taken before the bottom of the round, go up and get him.
Yeah, if it's like a Jermaine Johnson, like we talked about, Thibodeau potentially falling, that we all think is kind of BS. But if any of these other guys fall, that's going to be something to keep an eye on as far as Chiefs fans, at least in Kansas City, will be going crazy if these guys get into the 15, 16s, because Brett Veach likes to be aggressive and move up. I don't want him to package both 29 and 30 to move up if they can. So I'd hope it gets closer to like 17, 18 to move up and get somebody. And like I said, it doesn't fix the problem necessarily at a starting edge, but if you put Chris Jones next to another monster like Jordan Davis in some situations, you're going to wreak some havoc on the interior offensive lines within the AFC West.
One more thing on that too, because you said it too, where like most defensive tackles aren't 3-down tackles anyway. They're not every down tackles. Like you want that rotation up front as much as possible, keep these guys fresh. And if you can do that, I know like I'm a little biased with the Bucs 3-4 system, but that's what worked so well on that interior, was that there was a constant rotation of these guys and they weren't left in there. Even like as good as they were, like even a guy like Vita Vea wasn't left in there for, he was in maybe half the team's defensive snaps and was still very impactful. And I think that's kind of with the way that, these offenses are, I think you need to keep getting those really athletic guys in there. So the more you can bolster that interior, the better that the pass rush is going to be inevitably.
Yeah, that's probably a better way to put it, is how valuable is a player who's going to at best play 50% of your snaps, because that's when he's at his most effective, rather than, putting a guy at his size and speed out there, his size and just athleticism out there for 65, 70 snaps a game. By the end of the game, like you're not going to be getting the impactful player that you need in that situation. So, and that goes like to your point, that goes with all defensive tackles. Well, let's go to the 5th and final topic. And this is going to be an interesting one, because we know at some level, at least one of these guys is definitely going to fall. And that is, there's 3 guys that are kind of coming off injury that are projected first round picks. I kind of want to get your thoughts on just overall, the stock of these guys, if you will. And it's Michigan edge rusher David Ojabo with the Achilles injury suffered during his pro day. And you've got Andrew Booth, the defensive back, who had a core muscle injury. And those are a little bit more common, but still not something you want to see in the offseason or, leading up to the NFL draft. And obviously Jamison Williams being the big one with the ACL, although we saw, and it's inevitable every time there's a draft, you're going to get a social media video of a workout showing that they look great. It's just chalk it up. It's part of like the agent, like to-do list if you've got a player. But how do you see, that kind of playing out? Let's start with Jamison Williams, because he's the one that, even though he's coming off, it's still based on projections that he's still going to go really high. And let's work our way backwards from the way that I explained him. So where do you see, and what do you think about Jamison Williams?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's video or not. I always look at those videos though, and I'm like, should he be doing that yet? Like, do we really need to like put him through that and risk, a setback or whatever? Like, can't we just stick to like, we know what ACLs are, we know what ACL tears entail, we know what the rehab process entails. Can we just trust them on that? And I think that, I don't think that that's necessarily even, I think it means that he'll fall a little bit just because of how deep this wide receiver class is, and because you've got other options that could be just as effective for your franchise to take earlier in the round. That being said, I don't think he falls out of the second round, or falls into the second round rather. I think that, again, because we know it's an ACL tear, we know how to rehab this, we know how much time this is going to take. He still should be ready for next season, and coming off of that injury. And I think that you're getting a really, really good receiver at maybe a little bit of a discount price. So I think that there will be plenty of suitors for him, and I wouldn't be surprised if you even see like someone trade up to like seeing that he's falling and being like, no, we're just going to scoop him up at this point, because he's a good player.
Yeah, you get value, especially when you're talking to Bucks fan. Bears, a little different now, but you have teams like the Chiefs where where a player might not be able to necessarily have that impact right away, but still has value for you 6 months from now, where you're all of a sudden you have a fully healthy Jameson Williams. Because maybe it's just me, but I kind of assume that most NFL players at some point, whether it's high school, college, or in the NFL, have torn an ACL. Like, I think it's just so common now. It's like, it's a common thing for people to come back from. And Achilles, much more significant injury, but we saw with Cam Akers, we saw with Eric Fisher coming back when he went to the Colts. Like, even that is an injury that I think it was like 6 months coming back from an Achilles. I don't think that's normal.
That was insane. I was again like, should he really be out there? I don't think so.
I talked to one of the former Chiefs athletic trainers, Aaron Borgman, and I was just like, is this normal? Like, is this the new age thing? And he's like, that guy's a mutant. Like, he's not a real person. That's not normal at all. But as science and just medicine get better, you're going to see these things not have quite as an impact as they did. But I got to go straight to David Ojabo, because he's the one where if he can fall, because it's a huge need for the Chiefs. They haven't had a history of necessarily taking injured players in these kind of situations before. We've seen it with some other guys, Jalen Smith being one a few years ago, different position, different situation, but it was a need for the Chiefs at the time, and they did not take an injured player. And the Chiefs vice president of sports performance and medicine, Rick Burkholder, is one of the best, if not the best athletic trainer in the NFL. He's been the president of PFATs. If they sign off on him, he's okay. If not, doesn't mean he didn't sign off on him, but I will trust the decision they make at that time.
Sure.
What do you see as far as David Ojabo stock? Because it's a pretty serious injury and it's almost a redshirt type of season for him. There's a lot of storylines here. You could spend an entire podcast talking through the value for this one, but what's your feelings on David Ojabo in this draft?
Well, I think that you brought up a good point too, in that like there is a very thorough evaluation process that each of these teams do on these prospects, and whether or not they're injured, right? Like, they put them through the however many point tests at the combine and like if you have anything wrong with you, they're going to find it. But that being said, his injury is so significant and it happened so recently. That at the pro day, so it was like that. Like, you just hate to see that. I hate when something like that happens at a pro day, because it puts you back for the entire season. So again, now you're looking at someone where he was a first round talent because he could be an immediate impact player. Now he can't have that immediate impact anymore. So are you going to spend that kind of capital on someone that you're going to have to sit anyway, probably, at least for most of the season? And then especially, it's not as easy to assimilate, I feel like, for those edge rushers into a defense, a brand new defense, especially at the next level. Whereas I feel like when you're talking about someone like Jameson Williams, especially like joining the Chiefs, even, like, you have a set established offense. You've got good pieces around him that can help him. It's not like he's trying to do this all on his own and he's trying to fit into something that everyone's kind of trying to figure out. Whereas on defense, I feel like, that it evolves so much and it's just going to be hard. So I think that, he's going to fall significantly, and again, that's a really hard injury, and some guys don't come back from injuries like that. So my heart just sank for him, because he's such a good player, and you really have to bank on the fact that, and again, if you have a really great training staff that you trust, that can get them, to where you think, and says that, evaluates him and says, no, we can get him back to full tilt. then that's something you consider as well. But those are conversations that go on behind closed doors that the public won't be privy to.
Right. But it's fun to talk about. So we just kind of prognosticate and just kind of guess around what they're thinking. But, kind of this isn't a unique thought that I'm bringing up. And I've shared this, and others have shared the same sentiment of, you get to the end of the first round and we're guessing at, instant impact, but there's a lot of research. How many impact pass rushers do you see as rookies who aren't taken in the top 15?
Right.
Like it's a hard position to make an instant impact. Well, if you get past your fourth or fifth top, defensive end at the end of the first round and they're all gone, whoever you draft at edge at that point isn't going to necessarily step in and make an instant impact. So if you're already looking at kind of a red shirt or a situational pass rusher type situation for a guy that you're taking, like a Boye Mafe or one of those guys who could be available at the end of the first, a Josh Pascal, who might be able to start right away, but has a lower ceiling from what some people are saying, just about what type of player. I don't
understand that with him. After talking to him at the combine, he was so impressive. And again, I don't want to necessarily put a ton of stock into like what is said at a podium session, but the way like he was asked to break stuff down for reporters, and just his football IQ was off the charts, and just his study habits and work ethic that he was talking about. I was like, ceiling? Okay. He's impressive.
Yeah. He's I'm very much in the double up camp. And so my ideal scenario now is to take an Ojabo at like 29. You get the 5th-year option. So when he's healthy, you can get him at that, but then follow up with it with like a Josh Pascal at 50. Because they're picking, just a little bit later. And then they've got 62 also to double up on edge. And so you kind of get that high ceiling, level of an edge rusher that the Chiefs, even if they don't win the Super Bowl, they're going to be good enough where they're not going to be getting the top 4 defensive end in any draft with where they're going to be drafting consistently. So if you can get an Ojabo and again, double it up with another guy, because they need a few guys at that position. I love that. But again, I'm not the one having to make those calls, and I'm not the one staring at their MRIs and talking with them about all of it.
Thank God, right?
Yeah. Okay. That's a job that it's a thankless job for a lot of reasons and for a lot of people. But yeah, no. You have any other thoughts on the draft as we wrap the show up? I really appreciate Carmen Vitali of the Draft Network. What's your one big surprise in this draft? Let's get that, and I'll do like a rapid fire questions for you right now.
Ooh, one big surprise. I think I already said it though, because I think that like it's going to be that Kenny Pickett's going to be the first quarterback taken, and I think it's not going to be until later. That's my big surprise.
What do you mean by later? Let's put a number on this.
After the top 15.
Okay, so no quarterback until after the top 15. First pick being Kenny Pickett. All right.
I'm digging myself into a hole right now because I have to do my mock draft for tomorrow.
Freezing cold takes will be all over it, Carmen. Don't worry about it. So, and then what you had a chance to go to the combine and talk with a lot of these guys. We went to the Shrine Bowl and had a chance to interview some of these guys. A lot of them will be picked on Saturday. Who was your favorite or a few favorite players that you interviewed or that you talked to?
Hands down, Trent McDuffie. I love this kid. I am obsessed with him. He is my draft crush, darling. He's whatever he is. I was so impressed by him. And then I also went back and I talked to a few like scouts and coaches about him too. And just his versatility and his attitude is just awesome. Like as a corner, he wants to play safety because he wants to hit people. And he spends 4 to 5 hours a night studying film, whether that's his old film, whether that's film of, various teams in the league, other schemes. He is just like this football junkie, and he is also just a smiley, wonderful, positive person. And so I wish that he was going to be available for the Bucs at 27, because I shudder to think what Todd Bowles could do with him in that defense, because he could just go everywhere and do everything. And I wish that would happen, but it won't. He's not getting out of the top 15.
If the Chiefs somehow trade up and shock everybody, because it's not a name I've necessarily heard, but it's a position that a lot of guys are being kind of mocked. The Jalen Petrie, the Lewis Seen, cornerback, safeties, it's all in there. Chiefs need some depth in a lot of different places, and some guys who can step in and make an impact. And Trent McDuffie seems to be one of those guys. But if Chiefs end up drafting Trent McDuffie, you're going to be the first text message saying, "When can we have you on? When can we have you on to talk about why you were professing all of this admiration?"
All of this admiration. Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, he can just do everything on the back end of a defense. And for Chiefs who are needy at both corner and safety, those corner and safety spots, yeah, he'd be a great fit there too. But I want him to go to the Bucs.
I kind of hope it happens now, just so I can have that text message. And I trust you and what you're saying about him. And I know from following all the draft stuff, obviously, people think very highly of him. But it's cool to have that confirmed by somebody who sat there and talked to him. My favorite player that we interviewed, and I think the laboratory guys, Kent Craig and Maddie, would agree. Marquand McCall, the defensive tackle from Kentucky, was a whole lot of fun to talk to. Jelani Woods was also a whole lot of fun to talk to. Our fun. Producer Tucker had him rolling before we started that interview. He was just laughing his tail off, and we had to stop it to get it going. He was a lot of fun. There are a lot of good personalities out there, and obviously the K-State alum in me is going to be happy to see wherever Skylar Thompson goes. I think Skylar Thompson is going to be a value for whatever room he ends up in. I think he's going to be a spot starter in the league. These guys who step in and necessarily lead your organization. But backup quarterbacks aren't there to lead your organization. Backup quarterbacks are to be assets for your starter, to help them out. You ask guys like Chase Daniel, who's made a hell of a career being a great sounding board for starting quarterbacks.
Yeah, Ryan Griffin. Ryan Griffin is another
Chad Henne. He's another guy. He makes a career out of it. But that's what they're there for.
The quarterbacks in the Bucs quarterback room, actually. We joked at the Bucs that Ryan and Blaine were basically Tom's offensive QCs. Yeah. So they were his quality control coaches, is what they were.
The amount of stuff that are put on the backup quarterbacks that have nothing to do with their ability to step in and win a football game.
It's worth their weight by far. They're the best at that. But I just thought it was funny. It was Tom and his QCs.
And Skylar Thompson is going to be, I've had a chance to be around a lot of people who know him. I've talked to Skylar a few times. He is absolutely one of those people that he's been a winner everywhere he's gone. And his teammates, everybody speaks so highly of him that I am biased on this one. But he is going to be a value for any team. But Carmen Vitali of the Draft Network, we appreciate you for joining us here on Outside the Trenches, presented by our friends at Jack Stack Barbecue. If you have a chance over the next few days and you're hungry, go grab some Jack Stack, 6 different locations around Kansas City, and they will take care of you. But Carmen, we appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you.